of me using the F word is non-existent. The probability of me slapping my elbow on the table while I'm lecturing is non-existent. The probability of the two coming together is more significant than them happening separately. That's corroborative significance. And so when you do algorithms, what you end up setting is that these data sets aren't really independent. These data sets often bleed into each other. So if they bleed into each other and you can weight them based upon the level of uncertainty and weight them based upon how significant they might be as entire sets of data, you can put together something that will give you a value. And that value will at least be educative, right? I mean, and for policymakers, that's often all they get. You have to wonder when Truman made a decision to bomb Japan. I mean, no one knew what was going to happen. There was all these predictions both ways, and they just had to make a decision. They had to educate themselves as best they could and made the best decision they could at the time. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what you're looking for.
That answers. That's a very good answer to the question. Just as an update, we can continue speaking, but we're reaching about an hour, so I wasn't sure if you had anything else on your plate. But I just wanted to give you notice that we were reaching about an hour.
I have nothing scheduled until about 25 minutes from now.
Okay.
It's another phone call, so
I'll have to try to find. Now I'm on the hook for 25 minutes of questions.
I think it's too bad you're not in Boston. In Boston, in the end of September, at the Sheridan and the Associated Auditorium, I think it's the Naval Auditorium. No, the Heinz Auditorium. They're going to have this wild event called the International Genetically Engineered Machine Competition. This is really wild. I went last year. We won our division, and it was a small division because there are not many people who do policy for like the folks at NC State and very few other places. And so what ended up happening is I'm going to be one of the judges this year. And this is high school, undergraduates, graduate students, and private research firms who bring their brand new discovered genetically engineered machines to the meeting. And I'm sort of the stick in the mud who's going to be asking them questions like, why is this such a good idea? Right? And it's going to be really, I think, instruction. It's going to be an education. It's people from all over the planet, right? They're from every continent, but Antarctica, but they're from every continent. They're from the major universities around the planet, and they're all bringing their little toys to this thing. And it's fascinating. It's just fascinating what these people are doing. You know, they're taking E. coli, they're pulling out some of the gene sets, they're just replacing them with these bio bricks, which are these genetic cartridges, and they're taking an E. coli, which in and of itself is fairly innocuous, and turning it into, like, I don't know, a sensor, or turning it into a way to cure disease, or turning it into, and it's like that robot competition we used to watch on television where people had robots beating up on each other. But this is the wet part of it. This is the genetic part of it. And they're the species people, right? They're the people making the new species. And it's really fascinating. And it's really fascinating. And I'm waiting. I mean, the only reason I'm spending a whole week there is just I want to find out how they answer the questions. You know,
and whether those microbes can survive Boston winters, which is the real challenge.
I mean, I talked to some folks from, I'm not going to give you too much information on this, but I talked to some folks from another country, not USA, who were experimenting with bugs. I won't tell you what type of bug, but they had done the experiment. They had changed gene sets and changed genetic behavior in order to make the bugs less pesty. So they were less of a pest. And they were doing it into an environment where they actually had released them.
Mm-hmm.
Like they just flew away into the ecosystem, right? I mean, they created a pest that never had evolved on the planet and then was released. And I was like, geez, weren't you concerned? The last thing you want is for something to go out there and start, producing a next generation of species, and not sure if it's going to crowd out the other generation or it's going to cause the problem to become even worse. There's a lot of people doing mosquito research right now that's just frightening. I mean, I understand it'd be a really good idea if mosquitoes weren't able to carry dengue fever, but I'm not quite sure that the best way to do this is to genetically re-engineer them and then release mosquito populations that have been genetically re-engineered into the environment. And it's the same big question. It's like, what happens when you change microbes or you change the bacteria, or you produce a life form and turn it out on an ecosystem where it never existed before? And if we interact with microbes that are based on an alien ecosystem, I mean, who knows? Who knows? I mean, it could be its death knell. It could be, I don't know, it could make it, grow at astronomical rates. There's no telling what the implications of this could be. That's why you need those crazy ass folks in methods and measurement to come up with new algorithms to do the work on this. And they're not that expensive. They're just smart people with a lot of time who want to do this stuff.
And so you kind of mentioned there previously the environment that they would be working within. Do you think there's value in some respect also in disrupting that in some respect? That is to say, they, like, for example, when we take drugs from the rainforest and we add them to our medical supply, ultimately you're changing something about our environment, our medical environment, but it is also assisting us. Do you think that the fact that we can perhaps even use these microbes from other planets might be not just something that we consider in terms of risks to the microorganisms, risks to us, but also benefits for us? And you think that that's
Sure.
a value to us? Do you think that's an ethical thing to do?
Oh, that's two questions. Would it be a value to us? Probably. Whether it's ethical or not is a whole other issue. But one of my other hats I wear is I'm on the Risk Communication Advisory Committee for the Food and Drug Administration, right? And so I look at these questions, and we know that the side effects of drugs are pretty significant. There's about 60 drugs that are out there that are so significant that they come with incredibly nasty warnings, and we reviewed them. And no drug it seems to be a freebie. Also, most of the drugs we've created don't work a lot. I mean, the drugs work. 20 to 40% success rate is really good, right? I mean, you sort of take a drug hoping it's going to work, but there's no drug designed for you. Mm-hmm. Sometime in the future, there will be a drug designed for you, right? We will know enough about your genome. We will know enough about what's wrong with you. We will know enough about how to take the drug and adjust its potency and its structure, its chirality, everything to work for you. We know that's the possibility. Now, that's great. But the question becomes whether our trip to Mars is going to be just an adventure in biopiracy or not. And biopiracy is a weird thing because in this world, our planet, the biggest implication of biopiracy is that we go to other places and we find natural products, and then we derive chemical substances or compounds from them, which then go into drug medications, which we then sell back to the people who are from the same rainforest that we got the original natural plant from. That is an ethical question here, right? I mean, take their stuff and then sell it back to them because it's better now. And I think that's where the ethics issue is. But the whole question about going to Mars in order to in order to cultivate and then farm their microbes is. I can see. I mean, I know some really wild people in my job. I'm sure I could find people who would say that might be a really good idea, but we have no idea what's there. I'm not sure we'd have to do that. Because the drug, for example, that we use for malaria, there's it's called artemisinin, I think it's called. It used to come from a plant. Now it's just produced chemically. We found ways to genetically induce the drug, so we could just make it. I'm not sure we need to farm out microbes for this. I think we can be really creative. I think that's what the genetically engineered folks are doing. You know, I'm not sure we want to go to Mars for this. Can it be helpful? Yeah. Yeah, I'm not, you know, I hope, yeah. I just, there's so many different probabilities. Probably we're going to interact with the microbes. It's going to be positive or negative. I just had this mental view of our initial explorers going there and sealed away in these little laboratories, much like the type of secure environments that labs use right now when they're doing research. Like if you do some really serious bio research and you're dealing with pathogens, you know, you're going to have a pretty secure lab environment to do that. I sort of see this type of relationship with folks heading off to not just Mars, but other colonies on other planets. That was that relationship is. I can't see us just interacting directly with the environment. You know, I don't think the probability you could find a planet which has evolved and will be kind to the human species is really slim.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's I don't know what probability that would be. It would be pretty damn low. I haven't thought that one out. That would be a really big whiteboard. You'd have a lot of circles and squares on that board to try to figure out how the interactions would take place. But I think we're just going in a circle. I think we're getting back to our perspective of that you really need to have new ways of doing it, new methods.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just use the human-centric perspective on this. You know, human centrism has caused, like, I don't know, human centrism justifies us taking nasty production facilities and shipping them over to Southeast Asia and producing products there and then shipping them back to the United States when they're finished, because those folks over there are a lot poorer than these folks here, and so we have to pay them a lot less to do it. It's the same thing. It's the same human centrism that just dominates this reasoning. That's just wrong. Strangely enough, I work with a guy who does rhetoric of plants. I'll have to ask him because he might have a different perspective on this. But he's looking at the sensitivity of non-human actors. You know. There was Bruno Latour is a famous writer. Mm-hmm. Who talks about agent network theory. He comes really close in his early writings to talk about that there are so many different actors in the decisions we make. And I think in his early years, he would have given microbes some rhetorical space, which would be cute, but I'm not sure how you would do that. Mm-hmm. But he's still around. You might write him. I think he's at Paris SciPo right now, so I'm sure he's out there. He's a little bit reticent to go back to his old theories, but yeah, I wonder if microbes should have a rhetorical space. Good question. You know, I'm not sure how many people in the debate community have discussed microbial rhetoric.
It would be, I would say it's a long time coming, but I've seen a lot of strange things happen, so, you know.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, over a few decades of debate, boy, the world has changed radically, so I'm I'm not sure where else to go on that. But I'm a big, obviously, you know, at this point in my life, I'm working on is bizarre methods. That's what I do. I'm the social science editor to the Journal of Nanoparticle Research. I sit around and figure out whether the methods make sense or not. So, it's where your career sometimes goes, where you're not in total control. You're in economics, you wait.
Yeah, well, I'll just be bossed around by math majors for the rest of my life.
They always do that. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
That's how they go.
Yeah.
Well, I fear I don't have too much more to talk about. You've given a fantastic interview, by the way. Thank you. It is both engaging and informative. So I think I'm getting it to about the end of what I have, and it's good because it sounds like we came full circle. But absolutely. So do you have anything you would think of adding, kind of summatively, or anything you felt like you wanted to explore more in this discussion?
I think we covered it all. I think my perspective of coming up with a new way of doing this type of thinking needs to take place. It can't be human-centric. It has to be something else. I'm a big advocate of algorithms, so I think if I was teaching my graduate class at algorithm, this is a really good subject to put on the whiteboard.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because even though we may not be able to collect all the data to put in all of sets of brackets of variables that might be relevant, just trying to figure out what they might be is often entertaining. You know, and it's probably due. I think we realized after with emerging science, because it really went from biotechnology to nanotechnology to synthetic biology to this. These emerging sciences and technologies are teaching us we're just not close to being ready. We're so used to figuring out, you know, we look at products, we look at the probability that people will interact with the products, and then we look at how dangerous the products are. We do a mathematical calculation. And that's okay when you're dealing with stuff when you're dealing with things you know about. But when you're dealing with incredibly high levels of uncertainty, that just doesn't work. That math is just ridiculous. You know, I mean, everything is just ranges of probabilities against ranges of probabilities. And boy, that math is complicated. You know that your economics major, it gets really complicated when you have range of probability, because they don't sum well together. Mm-hmm. That's probably, if I was involved with not that I'm going to be doing it, I just signed on to a decade of research in nanoscience. So I think if I was going to do something like that, I would probably, if I was going to be funding, I would fund folks to try to figure out how to be able to evaluate things like microbes and bacteria in ways that are not human-centric. And then I'd really like to figure out if they do deserve a voice or not. If there's a rhetorical place for them or not. Because I'm not sure people have talked about that. We've talked about it with endangered species for a brief period of time. Mm-hmm. Whether they deserved a rhetorical space or not. But I don't think people have got to the microbial and bacterial levels yet, which is always fun.
And I mean, while we don't give much of concern to, except in considering harmful risks to the microbes in our own environment, is an interesting part of opening that rhetorical space for microbes to think about vastly different kinds of life, or vastly differently constructed life.
Well, I mean, if we had a few hours, we could sit down and generate a list of the top 10 worst experiences in history coming from using human-centric values to try to understand new things. And it wouldn't take long to put that list together. And then from that list alone, you would make a pretty damn powerful case that maybe we need to do something else.
Well, I think that's a fantastic kind of summation of what we're talking about. And again, thank you very much for deciding to be interviewed as part of the NASA debate interview series. We will be using your interview as research when we're making arguments on this. And then just thank you for all your help.
No problem.
And this has been very engaging discussion, and I hope I interviewed you as well as this topic serves.
Sounds like fun. Good luck with your debating season, and give Paul a big hug for me.
He's not a huggy kind of guy, but
I've been to his wedding. I mean, I've known this guy for a long time. All right, take care, buddy.
Thank you.
Bye
You too.
bye.